Welcome to UpYourStack podcast. I'm your host, Noah Burke. I'm also the co-founder of OBO, an elite HubSpot solutions partner. Every week, we feature some of our favorite app developers who've either built their apps on HubSpot or have integrated with HubSpot to help you get the most out of your HubSpot tech stack. And today, I'm really excited to have Sean as our guest of the show, and he's with Lucky Orange. Sean, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Noah. I'm super excited to chat, and we love HubSpot here at Lucky Orange, so love talking about the ecosystem.
That's great because we'll be talking quite a bit about it today. So, you know what? Let's just dive right in. I think the first thing I've always known is guests want to know what exactly, or listeners want to know what exactly do you guys do? What does Lucky Orange do?
So Lucky Orange is a conversion rate optimization toolkit, and really there's a lot of different ways to approach CRO, and we attack it from the angle of research and understanding what visitors are doing on your site and trying to figure out why they're doing that. And we're providing qualitative data to people through things like session recordings, heat maps, surveys, communication tools like that, conversion funnels, form analytics, all sorts of tools to help you wrap your mind around what's actually happening. What are people doing while they're on their site? And it's a great partner to a lot of the quantitative data sources that we find out there. And Lucky Orange really is helping to have people make more confident decisions with their website, more informed decisions to say, we think this might be happening based on the numbers. Lucky Orange comes in and says, here's what's actually happening. They're scrolling around, they're clicking on something you don't want them to click on, whatever it is. And we'll dive into all the use cases, but really helping to fulfill that picture of let's make a confident, informed decision.
I think that's critical for any organization who has a website to make sure, one, you are absolutely converting your audience visiting that website into customers. And so how did this come about? There are a lot of tools out there that do heat maps and things such as that to help people with conversion or optimization, but why Lucky Orange?
Yeah. So I think that Lucky Orange, I'm not one of the founders, but I've been close to the founder story and been close to them, spent a lot of time around them. And they were coming from like a paid marketing background. And they saw this story play out again and again, where it's decisions based on quantitative data are a little bit dangerous. And when you don't fill in the picture with the qualitative side, you're really just leaving ideas on the table. You're leaving research on the table. And of course, like you mentioned, there's a lot of tools in this space, and there's a lot of different ways to attack CRO and go the different tools. And so I think that was the original idea, was let's build something to paint a full picture for people. And as we've grown and as we've evolved partnerships and integrations with things like HubSpot, we also have integrations with Shopify and Square and all sorts of platforms. But that's been a real key driver for growth within the company. But the original story was really just based on seeing that gap and living it day to day, saying, we're making these decisions. I wish we had better data, then building a company around it here in Kansas City. So it's not like we're on the coast or anything. It's just some guys in the middle of the country saying, I think we've got something here.
It's really interesting. I think a lot of people spend a lot of money on paid media, but they don't spend the last mile marketing, the conversions of those people who are visiting your website into actual customers. And I got my career in online marketing back in the day, almost 15. I'm dating myself now, 15, 18 years ago, when pay-per-click was the Wild West, and you're still convincing people to go from phone books, put money on this thing called Google. What is Google? And you're able to pay per click. And one of the things is people would spend so much money on this paid media, but when you go to their website, it looked horrible. Like they weren't measuring the right things. It was almost like they'll spend 99% of their money on driving people to their website, but 1% of actually figuring out how to convert them once they get there. So how does Lucky Orange help companies increase that conversion rate?
Yeah. So I think that a really good way to think about optimization, in my opinion, is that maybe 80% of it should actually be research. And then the 20% is your experimentation. You're pulling levers, of course, with A/B testing, but other things like pricing and packaging and all these other things that we can do with experimentation. But I really think that it's that research component where we're helping people. And I see that playing out in two different paths. So there would be the proactive optimization, where we're trying to find something on the website to improve. We're saying, we don't know anything that we're driving off of. Maybe we've got a couple of hunches, but we're really just saying, what could we optimize? So we'll watch session recordings, we'll study heat maps, and we'll say, oh, wow, I noticed that there's something happening here, and then move forward from there into experimentation. The other path would be more reactive. So your customer support team comes through and says, we're getting a trend of people commenting about having trouble checking out, or we're releasing a new A/B test and we want to keep an eye on it. you can use our tools to monitor and investigate what's happening there and get that qualitative data to say, oh, shoot, customers are having an issue with this. Let's just guess and change it and update and try and fix it. Where Lucky Orange comes in, it shows you what might actually be happening there. And so there's a variety of different use cases across the organization. But broadly speaking, it's those two buckets of proactive and reactive optimization.
And who is your customer? Who is identifying, you know what, I need to focus on this optimization? Are these marketers or you mentioned customer success or customer
Yeah,
support, but who is it?
we see a broad appeal. We work with everybody from the solo entrepreneur who's starting their first gig and starting their first online store, all the way up through enterprise and agency sort of customers, and a lot of relationships there. Within the organization itself, I see a few different ways that it plays out. With a UX person who's releasing changes, they want to see how people are interacting with the new page. With customer support, you can say, I have a ticket from this person. They were on our site. They were doing something. Let me go watch their session recording and see what might have happened. Or if they're live on your site and you're chatting with them using our chat tool, you can see what they're doing. Even from a sales perspective, and a lot of the conversation around our HubSpot customers is about how they would use it for sales. We see people watching session recordings of a prospect to say, what content did they engage with on our site? What did they skip over? What pages have they not visited yet that I might need to push them down a certain marketing channel through a certain automation to get this content in front of them and make sure that when I tailor my sales pitch, I know what they've seen and what they haven't seen. And so we see applications throughout there. And similar to the UX, it would be the developer type where you're trying to bug squash and do whatever. We see appeal across a variety of people.
That's fascinating on both the customer success and sales side. As long as I've been in the industry, I hadn't considered for salespeople to be able to watch. Is one thing where you can see what did they open, what pages they visited, what material did they read. But oftentimes the only way to know that is they fill out a form, so they actually identify themselves up front. But what's fascinating as a sales organization, how long did they spend on each of these pages? What were they looking at? How fast were they scrolling through? Did they land on your page and immediately go to the contact us section? Or did they hover over it? They scroll through it? Did they look over it? That information is gold for a salesperson to be able to have. And thank you for sharing that as a use case, because I doubt any of the listeners out there are thinking that. They're probably thinking like me, this is for conversion rate optimization. I'm just trying to convert, not to give this type of tool to the sales team.
Within there's even this idea of what is conversion rate optimization.
Yeah.
We're not the entirety of your conversion rate optimization efforts and your conversion rate optimization stack. We're in that space, but we also play in that support and sales space. And I would say even like the next level of using the tools for sales would be to create custom events on your site with Lucky Orange. And you say, anytime this prospect in this segment engages with this content or does some sort of action, similar to how we do with HubSpot, where we would send them an email or whatever, we can also put them in a bucket to look at their session recording and just study a heat map of what they were doing. So we can take it a step further into what you're talking about, which is take it down to what content have they engaged with. If they click on something, if they hover over something, if they're on a certain page for a certain amount of time, if they visited a few number of times, whatever it is, we can trigger automations and things within Lucky Orange to help you better study the data that then can lead to the actions you can take inside HubSpot.
Is there a particular type of customer you think is best suited for obviously when we think of CRO, it's almost anyone and everyone, but for the use case you just mentioned there, is this like a B2B use case for high ticket items? Who would be most interested in something like this?
I think that specific use case, you are probably talking about a B2B cycle. Generally speaking, I would say that if you have no idea what a heat map is, if you have no idea what a session recording is, if you have no idea what any of these tools are, there is a learning curve, right? Knowing what you're looking at, and then that step of knowing what to do about it is huge and is really challenging. And it's a muscle that we have to build up. And it's a muscle that even people that have been in the industry for a long time still have to keep working on. That reaction of, okay, I'm seeing people doing this. What does it mean? So there's some learning to be done there. The best fit customer is somebody who has time to be able to spend on the research and time to be able to spend on figuring out, okay, as we move forward, when we see this behavior, here's what we interpret that to mean, and here's what we do about it. So having that space, and not necessarily an FTE dedicated to conversion optimization, it could be, but the organizations that have the most success find a place to have their teams educate and consistently use the tools because it is a process.
I think it comes down to one, what are the quantity of leads that organization's getting?
Sure.
Are we talking about selling a $20,000 ticket, or are we talking about selling a $500,000 engagement? And is the expectation that you're working on only a few of these at any given time? You're expected to put in 20, 30 hours on each potential deal with a potential close rate that you're aiming for. And if so, then this can absolutely become part of your process. In fact, a lot of these organizations, I would argue in the professional services world, where every engagement is critical to their success, and there's really a lot of content associated with why that person's purchasing, would be huge for these sales teams to be able to have this type of insight. The more insight, the better. We flood sales reps with insights, with data, with everything they need, but hardly ever do we give them, what did they actually do on the website? What are some of the key reasons that Lucky Orange has gained traction in this marketplace? We alluded to earlier as other competitors, but where did your traction come from?
We've already hit on the fact that HubSpot is all about surfacing information and data at the prospect level, at the contact level. We fit in very nicely there with our integration. We can get into the specifics, but we fit in very nicely there because we are just adding more data straight to that prospect. We're adding more information and insight, whether you're using it for sales, you're using it for marketing automation, whatever it is, we're providing that heat map and session recording and other data directly into specifically the CRM cards within that record. And so that's a relatively new thing with the CRM cards, but we've always just said, whatever data you can get inside Lucky Orange, let's make it available inside HubSpot. And so I think that we fit in nicely just with the philosophy of we're gonna put all this data in front of you, and we're gonna build segmentation and filtering capabilities so that it's more actionable, it's more digestible. And I think that over time, we've just prioritized the relationship. We get a good amount of co-marketing opportunities with HubSpot. We get a good amount of visibility because we just say yes to stuff. When they come and say, we have this program, do you want to be a part of it? The answer is yes. Or if they say, we have this new functionality that if you build it in and you adjust the way your app is built and you work on that you will be more visible within the marketplace, or whatever it is, somewhat hypothetical situation, we have to prioritize it. And so that there's a demand on the organization to say yes to things. But I think that is definitely a core component to not overlook, is like just being easy to work with and saying yes to being an active partner in the ecosystem.
You're talking about CRM card objects, which is it's been around, but not for terribly long. And it's fascinating. You're putting all the information there and you built out the CRM card objects. Can you elaborate a little bit more on the benefit to a HubSpot user with that capability?
Yeah. So we're pushing the boundaries of my knowledge on HubSpot a little bit. But what I do understand is that what we're surfacing inside that contact record is a list of their session recordings, a list of pages they visit. Do you want to view a heat map of this? And so really what it is, I think it's all about efficiency. If we're studying a group of prospects, or in the case of sales, if we're studying a few prospects and we're trying to really get to the root of what is happening with them for whatever our goal is, we can directly access a session recording and watch that full visitor playback without leaving HubSpot. We can open the heat map viewer without leaving HubSpot. We can look at the surveys that they've responded to and the survey responses without leaving it. So it's really an efficiency thing. If you're trying to make that CRO function a part of a role, this makes it a lot easier to just tag it in there.
We're talking about CRO, but what you described there is more sales enablement, and not to necessarily confuse the audience, but this is sales enablement. This is giving additional capabilities to that team to be more efficient, better at their job, giving the sales team the tools they need to reach out to a prospect more clearly than they could have without this particular information surfaced. And so what do you suppose really, Sean, differentiates you versus the competitors in this space? We talked about earlier, there's a bunch of other companies who do similar things, but what's your secret sauce? What differentiates you?
Yeah, I can't answer that question without saying customer support. I think that we have a really relentless and supportive environment for our customers. And that, of course, goes through the direct, real human customer support and the education and all these things. I think as far as the actual app and integration goes, we pass everything. So this reflects our philosophy with our core offering in general, which is every subscription level gets every tool, gets everything. The only way you're ever going to pay us more money is if you want to track more sessions per month. or if you want to add more sites to your account or add more data, whatever it is. That's the only way you're ever going to pay more money to Lucky Orange. But when you flip on that integration, everything passes over. A lot of the integrations in our direct space don't do that. They'll chunk out certain tools, whether it's based on their actual core offering or not. And I do think that that's a differentiator because it really pulls those limiters off of saying, oh, shoot, I wish that we also had this passing over. So I think that's really the prime deal there, is that we pass over everything.
You make it easy to work with you. You're like, these tools were built for you. It doesn't matter if you're a 1-person shop or you're a 10,000 person organization. We're going to give you access to it all.
I was just going to say it's like a great, not to make a sports metaphor and alienate people, but it's like a great referee, right? Like a great referee, you don't know that they're making the right calls when the call needs to be made. They're not changing the face of the game. They're not changing anything. We know that there's already a lot to be done. There's a lot of data in there. So we need to make it as easy as possible. Pass it over, get it in front of people, and don't have them worry about, is the integration going to work? Is the heat map going to work? Is the session recording going to play back? Whatever it is, just make it work and get it in front of them, and then let their process and let their work and let their knowledge take over and get to that value as fast as possible.
I would almost even give you another analogy. It reminds me more like those in-app purchases when you get that new game on your iPhone, and you can either just pay for the game, which I always prefer. I'd rather just pay up front for the game and unlock everything than have to go through and pay $1 here, $5 here, $10 here. And it's like you took that philosophy. Listen, you're just going to pay for it. You're going to get it. I'm not going to nickel and dime you with more in-app purchases, but everything you need is going to be right there because you're really thinking from the customer perspective, how to make them as efficient as possible. And instead, it sounds like it's really just more about scale. How scaled are you that you need to be able to record more sessions, which is a great way of thinking of things. So how do you suppose, we talked briefly earlier how when HubSpot, obviously you can track what web pages people land on, the forms they fill out, the interactions they have. I think a lot of listeners may say, oh, I think I may know what gap they fill in the ecosystem. But in your opinion, Sean, what gap do you feel in the HubSpot ecosystem with Lucky Orange?
I think it's very similar to the way that we complement using Google Analytics. When you use Google Analytics, you learn how many people come to a page, how long they're there, maybe some conversion data, bounce rate, things like this that are really important. But what you don't learn is what they're doing on the page. And so we might sound like a broken record at this point, but what we're doing is we're filling that qualitative gap. And we're saying, okay, you know that a prospect visited this ebook landing page, or you know that a prospect spent a long time scrolling down this longer form product page, whatever it might be. Let's show you what they were doing there. That's really the role that we play. We think that, back to the confident decision-making, we think that the most confident decisions are made when you have that combination of quantitative and qualitative data in an easy-to-use format directly associated with the prospect that you're trying to study or the group of prospects that you're trying to study. And so it's that qualitative, quantitative thing.
Qualitative part, because I think that is often overlooked. It's like in the eyes of the beholder. Especially when people who are building websites, that's like the worst feeling in the world. You're building a website for someone and maybe they don't like it. Maybe they do like it. And it's like, how do you determine that? And really with your tool, honestly, it doesn't matter whether they like it or not. It really comes down to whether it resonates with the audience and is converting someone into a lead.
And I like to say that, and this is not an original quote, so I shouldn't put it that way, but behavior is communication. And so what we're seeing them do on the site, okay, they're spending an amount of time. If it's really short, that's indicating something. But what they're doing on the site where they're scrolling, they're clicking, and they're going around, that behavior is communicating to us what they think of our page. And component of conversion rate optimization is understanding what they're trying to communicate to us. Are they trying to say, I don't understand your messaging? Are they trying to say you're overwhelming me? Are they trying to say, I came to this site worried about your brand and now I'm more worried, or whatever it might be? That behavior that they're showing us that we can watch with a session recording or that we can study with a heat map is communicating to us. It's communicating, are we hitting the mark or not? And of course the conversion is the ultimate, yes, you hit the mark, you did it.
Correct.
But in between there, the optimization of the site is all about hitting the mark when it comes to understanding what they're worried about and overcoming that, and then also aligning with their motivations.
I know earlier we mentioned you can be a 1-person shop setting up your first e-commerce website. You can be getting 1 million visitors a month to your website. Is there a sweet spot for companies who are using Lucky Orange? Like, how do they measure that sweet spot? Is like they have over 5,000 unique visitors a month? Like, what is that sweet spot?
I was talking to a friend the other day who's just getting his own financial planning business started, and I had him put Lucky Orange on his site. And he doesn't get a lot of traffic, maybe 100 visits every 2 weeks or so, 50 visits a week, not much. And he has still found a lot of value out of it to say, oh, I didn't realize that people wouldn't be able to find that button, or I didn't realize that they weren't scrolling down far enough in the page. So I think there are insights to be had even at the really low level.
Mhm.
When we get up to thousands, tens of thousands, or millions of sessions a month, then it shifts to the Lucky Orange on our side. It shifts to saying, you got to get really good at segmentation and filtering because there's a lot of data in there. And it's a similar to approach of how you would work with thousands and thousands of prospects inside HubSpot. If you want to optimize for any given prospect, you've got to figure out who to optimize for. You've got to find them within the pile. And so the tools still work for people. Of course, a heat map with tens of thousands of data points on it is probably more accurate than one with 10. But when
True.
it comes to overall the approach, I would say that how you use the tools and how you engage with them and the parts, the segmentation stuff is the evolution as you get to those higher session counts.
That's a good way of thinking it, because obviously, if there's only a certain number of sessions each month, it's easy to almost look at each and every one of them. Versus to your point, there's millions. You're not sitting there all day long.
No, you're not.
Well, I'm moving
if
on
you
to
are-
person 102, 103.
Yeah.
Maybe this is a great lead in to the next question: is how is AI going to fit into your future roadmap?
We have staked a flag in the ground. And every conversation that I've been having, I've been calling out our space and saying, I don't think CRO tools are good enough. They've been great historically and they've done a good job. But I think that there's still too much effort on the individual to find the sessions that matter, to study the heat maps, come up with insights, take action on it, and go from there. There's 99% of the work is on the user. And that's
Correct.
historically been fine. I think that the AI can turn that on its head and can say, let's do the analysis, let's come up with the segmentation, let's find the insights, let's find the sessions that really matter and get them in front of you as fast as possible. We're not there yet. And there have been some AI related or built with AI, in quotes, related releases in our space so far. People are trying to work it in. So far, it's been a lot of like AI generated surveys and little insights that come along. And that's a great move forward. What we did as like a starting point is something called Lucky Orange Discovery that we released earlier this year inside the app. And basically what it does is it gives you a list of optimization opportunities. It's stuff that we think you should be paying attention to in your site. So for example, show me sessions of people who were frustrated while they're on my site. You click that, you get to a filtered list of sessions that has frustration indicators on it, rage clicks and stuff like that. Now that's not AI, so let's not get it confused. But what where we're planning on taking that is an LLM based thing that gets important sessions in front of you.
Oh.
We're still figuring out how it's going to work. We're still working on that, but it's certainly a huge component of where we want to go. I'll be careful about calling it AI or LLM even, but I think that there's definitely space there with us, and I imagine our entire space, to say, how can we get to the insights faster? Because we've talked a lot about use cases. We've talked a lot about how do you get to understanding what you're looking at. Even as a salesperson, like how do I know which sales copy I should want them to be reading? You can have in your head, I think this messaging is going to resonate or whatever, but that's what the AI tools in our area will do. Hopefully sooner than later, and hopefully it's us first, and hopefully ours are the best. And so that's what we're chasing right now, is getting to that insight faster, because we think that's where the ultimate value of a CRO tool is.
That's awesome here. Now, you did say something that piqued my interest. Rage clicking?
Oh, yeah.
How do you measure rage clicking? And then what is rage clicking?
So a rage click, one, it's a fun phrase.
Yes.
Really all it means is that somebody clicks something 3 or more times and nothing happens. So a lot of times what we'll see is on like logo banners or trust icons. The Better Business Bureau is on your landing page, a great trust icon. A lot of times people will click it and then they'll click it again, they'll click it again, and it won't link to something because they think it should be linked, but it's not. And so maybe they're not angry, but it's usually a confusion signal to say there's a link that's broken or people think something should be linked and it's not. And this falls in the category of frustration, confusion signals, alongside things like a shaky mouse and a few other elements that we can say, if this session includes that, somewhere along the line, the person was frustrated or confused.
Oh, thank you for sharing that, because that was just fascinating. First time I've heard that before. Well, I'll ask one last question. I think I actually may know the answer because you alluded to it earlier, but what suggestions do you have for people who are building apps in the HubSpot ecosystem? I think you may have mentioned it, but just for those who may have didn't catch it earlier, what would you recommend there, Sean?
I totally think the fundamental thing is being easy to work with and saying yes to opportunities, not building something and releasing it and hoping that the algorithm just starts paying you. You have to be active in managing it. You have to be active in optimizing your profile, and you have to be active in participating in the ecosystem and saying, wherever the ecosystem goes, which means wherever HubSpot goes with their tools, we have to continue to have a fit there. Just because we fit HubSpot today doesn't mean that we're going to fit them in 3 years, or even as fast as things move in 6 months. If they release their own heat map feature, that completely changes how you would interact with us. I think that proactive management and saying yes to things and being easy to work with and being a good partner is really a core part of it. All of the technical requirements and stuff aside, I think that's a good foundation and a good kind of philosophy to operate with when you're building an app in this ecosystem.
Listeners, you heard it. If you say yes, just say yes.
Just say yes.
Sean, this is awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. And really, that kind of wraps it up. Up Your Stack is a weekly podcast where we feature some of our favorite app developers who've either built their apps on HubSpot or integrated with HubSpot. It's also sponsored by the OBO Group, an elite HubSpot solutions partner. Sean, if people are interested in getting in touch with you, how can they find you? How can they find more information about Lucky Orange?
Yeah, luckyorange.com. Lucky common spelling, orange common spelling, luckyorange.com. We're all over social media. We do have our own podcast. It's over YouTube and all that stuff. You can find me on LinkedIn. That's usually where I'm at, usually where I'm most responsive. I love talking about CRO and all this related stuff. So definitely open to ideas and questions and partnerships and everything there.
Sean, thank you again so much. And if you're interested in leveling up your own HubSpot, feel free to reach out to the OBO Group at www.theobogroup.com. Again, Sean, thanks for joining us. And thank you for listening.